I came about 10 days after my first baby was born, and so my children have been raised in this village, and um, we just came and never left, as is the story of many. Um, I've worked as an advocate for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. I have worked for an organization called SAFE out of Dillingham, and I've worked for them for over 20 years now. For most of that time, I was the only advocate over on the east side, over here on the bay, covering about 16 villages, I think, on this side of the bay. Um, and then just a few years ago, I was joined by a second advocate. So we actually have two advocates here um, for the last 5 years or so. So our organization on this side of the bay is growing a little, and we're trying to um, have more services available down the chain, as a lot of the villages down the chain have very few services available to them. Um, and the other thing that I just wanted to let you know is happening with our organization is that we got a grant to start our own SART here on the east side, which means that a lot of people from the smaller villages would be able to come and make reports here in King Salmon or Naknek and have their forensics done here rather than having to fly from some of the chain villages, get stuck in King Salmon and wait to go to Anchorage or to Dillingham. We will be another stop for some of those more remote places down the chain. And so that's exciting. We're hoping that that just provides another avenue for reporting, and also provides, well, takes away one more obstacle that often stands in the way of reporting, just that the weather and the lack, the distance of travel and how intimidating that can be. And anyway, just one more option. So that's what our organization is up to. And so one of the other things that I have been doing for the last 12 years is being on the Alaska Police Standards Council, which is what I'm here talking about today. And I'll just give you a quick update, a quick recap of how I have even ended up on the council. The council is the people on the council are appointed by the governor. So way back when Governor Parnell was in office, I think most of you remember the Choose Respect campaign. Well, during that time, he told some folks that he wanted to appoint someone to the Standards Council who worked with victims and was from a village smaller than 3,000 people and who was a woman. And I happened to be working with an officer at the time who was connected to Governor Parnell somehow. And we were working on a case together, and he recommended me. And I had no idea what the Alaska Police Standards Council was. I didn't even know it existed. But I have a I have a habit of saying yes when people ask me to volunteer for things. So I said, okay, I'll try it. And so then began a long learning curve of understanding how our state manages certification and training, and how these monies are spent with our police departments. And so anyway, fast forward, since Governor Parnell, I've been reappointed multiple times to the council. And I think at this point, I'm the longest standing. I have, of anyone who's on the council right now, I've been there the longest. And I am currently the chair for the last few cycles. So just to kind of give you an overview of what the council is. Oh, and before I go into much detail, I just want to make it clear that I am only speaking as one of 15 council members. I'm not like the spokesperson for the whole council, or I'm just speaking to you as one individual who holds one seat on the council. And And of course, there's folks that probably could give you a lot more detailed information about how cases are handled, but this is my own perspective and my own experience on the council. Um, and so I apologize ahead of time if there's some questions I don't know how to answer, but I certainly will find the information if I don't have it today. Um, so the council is made up of 15 people, and they are appointed by the governor. So the council has the potential to change anytime we have another governor. Some of the council seats are held by, say, the someone in the Department of Corrections or the commissioner or different folks that are high up in our systems, our law enforcement systems in the state. And so and some of them are chiefs of police, and um, most of the police seats are held by people that have some sort of position in our law enforcement um, system in the state. But there are 3 seats set aside for public members. And when I first got on the council ages ago, these public seats were usually given to retired police officers, retired chiefs, people who had police background. But coming in as a person, as an advocate on the board, I was sort of an anomaly, a public member who actually has no police background. And since that time, there have been several other people like me that have been appointed to fill these roles that don't necessarily have any background in police work, which I feel like really is helpful because it gives much more of the public's perspective to these discussions, since we're not insiders in the police world, in the law enforcement world. So we are we're appointed by the governor, and our term is a 4-year term. And 2 of those public seats are set aside for towns smaller than 3,000 people, and the other is an open seat for, and of course, all of these people are residents of Alaska. So the main job of the council is to first of all set the standards that we want our law enforcement in our state to adhere to. So the standards are set in regulation, and our powers as a council are set in regulation. So if people want to change whether we have the authority to do something or the way that we make decisions, it has to be changed in the legislature. So we have sort of a narrow scope of powers that we can use to make decisions. So first of all, we're setting the standards, and then we are facilitating and deciding what trainings are available to police officers, and sometimes which ones will be required. And sometimes through our funding, we're assisting small different police departments to send their people to get the correct training to meet the standards. And one of the things that, as a person from a small community, that I have advocated for in my time on the board is to make sure that trainings are available in an equitable way to police departments in small communities. Because as you know, as many of you probably know, I won't assume that you know, but many of you would know that in small villages, we often have very small police departments, if any, and then there's certain times in the year when they are just really busy because of the fishing season or things like that. And so having training set at times of the year where small police departments are just not able to spare a person to attend, that can become a big obstacle. So I've advocated for that, to to be changed and to be um, training and good quality training be made for more available to the small departments, and that funding for that would not be a big obstacle. So helping some of the small departments um, be able to afford to send their folks to the right kind of training, um, adequate training, maybe, and hopefully even a generous amount of training. That's sort of my um, one of the things I advocate for. And as a person from a small community, I've always advocated for our small communities deserve high quality police presence, police work. If there's going to be police in our community at all, it needs to be high quality, ethical, um, just 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 the amount of quality anyone would want to have in their own neighborhood anywhere else. And just because we're small communities does not mean that we should have to put up with poor police work. I've seen in my own community that sometimes um, unethical or poor police work is far worse than having no police at all. And that's been my just my that's been the way I feel about it for a long time. So I have very little tolerance for um, just seeing poor quality tolerated because we're a small space, or because there's not very many people out here, or because they're largely native communities. I just think we all deserve to be treated with respect, um, and to have people in power to be have good ethics. Um, so a lot of times, oh, so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit scattered. Um, so the other part of what we do is when when an officer is found to have not met our regulations, we can we vote to not allow them to be certified in the first place, if they haven't held a certification yet, or we can vote to revoke their certification. When a person gets their certification revoked, that means that they cannot work as a police officer in the state of Alaska at all. And their their name also goes on a national registry. So other states that do look at these registries, they will know that this person has been decertified in our state, and that can be fairly limiting for them to get another job elsewhere. Um, and the whole goal is that we wouldn't have uh, people that are bad actors just moving around from department to department in the state. That if the state at the state level, the Standards Council decides this person is should not have a certificate, then they should not work anywhere in the state. Now, the one exception to that is our when a village, a tribe wants to hire an officer, we don't have any jurisdiction over people that are employed by the tribe, because the tribe is a sovereign nation. So, um, so there are different police positions that are employed by tribes that if people want to bring a complaint to us, we don't have any power in those situations. Now, there are VPOs are not certified by us at this time, but there is talk, and there always has been while I've been on the council, about changing that to where to go through VPSO, VPO, any kind of police training in the state, that we would certify those people. But yeah, if we don't have the power to certify them, and we don't have the power to decertify them either. So those are the one group that we don't have authority over. When we the process is usually, the way that we usually receive the information about police officers is because they are terminated from a department, And the department is required to fill out a form that they send to us. And on that form, they have to inform us whether they um, uh, would rehire this person or if they think this person should keep their certificate or not. And we get to see all of those forms as they anyone who's terminated, um, and and then we if they say that they would not rehire or that this person should not be certified, then we have people that investigate those cases. And sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes departments want to get rid of somebody, but they don't necessarily want to go the whole distance as far as making a complaint. But if there is evidence that comes forward when we see that form, sometimes our investigators will look further into it. The next step that happens is our investigator puts together a probable cause um, packet of information. And that's one of the things at the council meetings that we review. We review confidential information that is gathered by our investigators, often from the police departments themselves. And uh, we will review this information. And then one of the things that we vote on in the meetings is whether to um, go forward with revocation or not. So we're basically, um, as a quasi judicial body, making a decision on probable cause. Now, a lot of times people would like us to make decisions about people based on, things that they have done that are against internal policy, or things that they have done where they're just not great at their jobs. But those are the things that those are not things that we have that we take action on. Those should be handled internally in the departments, and our regulations don't allow us to make decisions based on poor performance or things like that unless it rises to the level that our regulations say. And our regulations are uh, they're one of the broadest things that our regulations say that we can decertify for is um, I'm trying to find the exact wording. Um, oh, that they do not have good moral character. So that's probably the most broad definition. And some of the things that fall under that are things like lying under oath. Um, and I'd say that a good majority of the cases that we review, um, there is some element of lying once the person's being investigated for something. And I'd say that that is something that comes up quite commonly for us. And of course, things that are criminal um, will cause a person to lose their certificate. But there's a whole process where it comes before us. We find probable cause, and then sometimes our investigators will go and find more information and bring it back to us, and then we have a further vote where we vote to revoke the certificate or not. And then if we vote to revoke, then that officer would receive an accusation packet from us, which includes all the information that we're basing the revocation on. And then they have that opportunity to due process where they can appeal. And then if they disagree and they want to go through the whole appeal process, the case can be taken before the Office of Hearing, the OAH is the Office of Administrative Hearings. And the case can be looked over by a judge that is, outside of our sphere. And he will give us, that judge, he or she will write up their findings on the case and give us recommendations. Like they feel like we've met the burden of proof or we have not in our decision to revoke. In my time on the council, I've seen OAH judges recommend one thing and we still vote to revoke that certificate, even though the judge says he feels like the person has a case for keeping their certificate. We are kind of the final say, and we don't have to agree with the OAH, but um, that is part of the officer's process to be able to um, get the whole case looked at by an outside party from a legal standpoint. And so any questions so far with all of that? That's a lot of mumbo jumbo.
No question so far, but I did have one. You were talking about you regularly receive complaints from law enforcement agencies, but you do receive complaints from community members as well. Is that correct? Are you going to go
Yes.
into that? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to go into that next.
Okay, perfect. Thank
So
you, Rebecca.
yeah, the so I brought up the receiving complaints from police departments because that's probably the first and main way that we find out that officers have done something wrong. Um, or that they've been arrested for something. That's one of the obvious ones. And it is true that sometimes we don't take action right away, like because if there is a big investigation and court case happening because of this person, or or sometimes the agency they worked for is involved in a big lawsuit with them. Sometimes we will wait a bit before we take official action, not to get caught up in all of the nonsense that's happening with their case. And so I've had questions like that, like, why haven't you revoked this person yet? And many times we're just waiting for the some of the other stuff to complete, and then we will do our part. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to. It just sometimes we're just waiting for some of these other processes to wrap up. Um,
I
so
did have a question related
yeah,
to some of the information you've shared. So going back, you were mentioning officers and trying to make sure like people aren't going to different states and just floating around like, because I think that people do have that perception sometimes. I'm wondering, is it standard for background checks of domestic violence and sexual assault for police officers? Because I've seen different research and reports about the high amounts of DV amongst law enforcement. And so I'm just curious about what that process looks like because it seems to kind of be a clash.
yeah. So a crime of DV is a decertifying thing for um, um, in our state. um, and it is in a lot of other states as well. But one of the problems that we all probably are aware of is how few times DV by a police officer actually is investigated or convicted. So people can have those kind of things happening in their lives, but it may not show up on a record at all, unfortunately. Um, but when it is on a record and it does come before us, we take it very seriously on the council. That's one of the um, things that's most likely to we find probable cause with DV.
And is that something also if they've had a history, they're not eligible to be hired on in the first place, or that
Yeah,
is not a disqualifying factor?
it is a disqualifying factor. Sexual assault or domestic violence crimes. Um, we we pretty much don't consider those people eligible. Now there are other crimes that people could have done in the past. Like we've had people that might have had some misdemeanors in the past, or like when they were young, different things like that. Um, but some of those things are not disqualifying, but DV and SA are definitely disqualifying. Um,
Okay. And then I know
and I saw a
you're
comment,
still,
but I just didn't catch it quite.
yeah, I can help verbalize the questions that might be similar in the chat. So we have someone asking if the council investigates all officer involved shootings or only if referred. And then similarly, I'd say this next one, someone asked, there's been some officers at APD that have been involved in multiple shootings recently. 2 of these officers have been involved in more than one fatal shooting. Can the APSC investigators start an investigation of a police officer on their own, or can this process only start with a request from the police department? So both of those are very
They're
similar
very,
questions.
yeah, very
Mhm.
related. Yeah, so that is one of the hard parts is if the internal processes of investigation and the internal ethics of the department aren't what they should be, sometimes these cases don't get referred to us. And for the most part, we don't dive into every case that we hear about because we don't actually, statutorily, we don't have the right to go in and overrule something that a department has decided about their own department within their own department policies. Um, and so that is a tough one. And there have been cases though in the past, and I guess with some of these newer cases, I'll be interested to find out the council's thoughts on it. But there have been cases in the past with police brutality where a department had investigated it internally and decided that there was no fault, or that it was within their policy, and then we ended up with the case and we ended up taking that person's certificate even though the department still wanted to employ them. So we are not always in lockstep with the departments about their decisions at all. um, and but I think what it takes is a combination of complaints from different entities to bring that case to overcome that obstacle of internal policy. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think Antonia is getting in sync with your response. And so she's wondering, in situations like that, it would take community members also referring and bringing to light maybe the officer being investigated by APSC if nothing happened internally. And then
Yeah.
similarly, again, a follow-up with that is, can APSC finish their investigations?
And I think the answer is like a soft no. Like we can't just insert ourselves into it in an investigation that's ongoing. Um, but I do know that they can request records based on a complaint or based on a recommendation um, from another agency sometimes. Um, and so there usually it's when something is being tolerated within a department that the overall um, that the community doesn't agree with, or that other policemen departments don't agree with, the combination of that pressure will um, overcome their ability to keep it indoors, like within their organization. But it's not an easy thing because our authority doesn't necessarily um, allow us to just dive into each department and ferret out problems. um, there's sort of an order that has to be brought to us in. And so that brings us sort of to the citizen complaint. And there is on our website, there's a place where you can put in a complaint. And what I would recommend is if you do put in a complaint, make sure that it's that you've read up on what the standards are in the first place to make sure that it meets one of those, that the what you're complaining about actually meets one of those standards. Um, because otherwise, it's pretty easy for that to be put on the back burner. Um, if you can't make your case that it's directly in line with one of our regulation by statute. Um, there's an awful lot of people where I've heard bad stories about them, where I personally would love to them not to be police officers, and I think they need to have some different job. But unless we can tie it directly to one of our regulations, we don't have the ability to do anything about that, or to even um, go forward and dive into it as far as looking for information. And our investigators have to go through all the processes that are, um, quite a bit of legal process to even subpoena reports and records. They're not allowed to just go and say, tell us everything about this person. They have to go through a process. And so one of the things, I was wanting to make sure that I made this super clear for you guys as far as if you do want to make a complaint, um, is that, for one, we can't handle complaints that are regarding personnel or agencies where we don't certify those people. So, like I said before, if they're hired, if they're employed by a tribe, and if they don't hold a certificate, we could, if they came before us wanting a certificate, we could deny them one. But we can't take away a certificate that they don't have. So that's our main power, is to take a certificate or give one. And so some of the groups that we don't have authority over are like VPSOs, tribal police, federal agents, and attorneys. Those are people that we do not certify and we can't decertify. And the other thing is that we don't have any regulatory power to review conduct that is with that is an issue of agency policy, and that's something that's hard for a lot of people to hear, is that the manner in which an investigation is done, or um, the outcomes of justice policies and things like that that have to do with officers, we don't have purview over those things. And if, but again, if in some way those can be tied back to one of the regulations um, that we do have, that then that's something that can be brought before us. One of the hard things about citizen complaints is a lot of times the first place that the complaint goes, like when we receive it, is we go back to that department. And I felt like that was problematic for a lot of people in our villages, especially, is that um, if you have a complaint about a police officer, and that complaint goes directly back to their chief, who is probably responsible for why this person is able to do the things they're doing, um, it pretty much puts people in villages in a bad space. And I've complained about this a lot of times, because I there was a person in our village that made a complaint about an officer, and then suddenly the chief of police was following them everywhere, their kids, anywhere their kids went on four-wheelers, there he was following them around, and just waiting for them to do something so he could ticket them or something. So very retaliatory. And so that's one of the things I've been advocating for with the council, is that citizen complaints would be dealt with differently than the norm. Like we can't go directly back to the chief in most cases, because that, and in small communities, it's too easy to know who it is that put in the report, even if it's confidential. Like you know how, I don't know if most of you live in small communities or are from small communities, but you know how everybody knows everything pretty much instantly. And that goes for these complaints too. Um, that and that's problematic for us. And so that's one of the things that I'm talking about in all of our meetings, is um, how do we open up some of these systems so that people can actually be heard about the way that they are treated in their communities, and the way those inequities show up.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, everyone on the call, I think, can relate to that and see. And there's been really good efforts, as Emily's describing in the chat, about there are some communities trying to find different outlets, right? So some of the questions, I'm going to scroll back up to Corinne's where I left off real quick. Can the council require more use of force training for specific officers or departments? And I'm going to add on, and if not, how would we advocate for addressing the use of force that we're seeing right now in Alaska, for example. Like, so maybe answer the question then if that's not able to be done, what would be a way to do that?
So I do not believe we do not have the power to require a particular officer to have more training on a particular subject. That's an internal thing that would happen within the department. And nothing in our regulation says that we can like assign a person to have to take a certain training. But as a council and the higher up, um, you know, the overall view, we as a council can discuss and vote on more training and improving training and allocating funding to better training on specific subjects. And that has happened in the past where the council um, feels like we need to up the training that all police officers are receiving on this certain thing, and we'd like to allocate these monies to add this training to what's available in the state. And or what's required. I mean, over time, the required trainings to receive a certificate have changed, and that's been because of the council finding different things to be important, um,
Yeah.
important improvements in training.
Another question was that if there's multiple community complaints on a closed case were submitted, would APSC be able to review that case?
Um, I guess I would need to know what it means by closed. Like, did it go through the criminal justice system, and is that what you mean by closed, or did it? What do you mean that APSC closed it? A complaint?
Maybe what I'm guessing they mean is if, let's say, there was, for example, like the use of force, right? And nothing
Oh,
was
okay.
done about it, and it's already considered a done matter. Um, it was closed and the officer's still working, for example.
Yeah, no, that is something I don't know the answer to because I don't know that I've seen a case like that that I can kind of refer to in my mind. So I'd be happy to look into that and find out like what is it that what is it that the council could do about something where a department has already done their own investigation, closed the case. Um, I'd say that the ones that we end up hearing and that we end up deciding differently than departments are often because that police officer got brought back to us for a different thing. And
Huh.
then those past acts got brought into it when we were overviewing their whole case. So it's not like that was the reason that it came before us, but something else brought it before us, and then that becomes part of the discussion. Does that make
Okay.
sense? I feel like
Yeah.
it's a little bit convoluted, but I feel like some things are no brainers. They definitely are going to come before us. Say like an officer gets arrested for sexual assault and it's in the midst of a big sexual assault trial. Like we will be seeing that case. Um, Now it might not happen until after the trial has um, gone past. And just to let you know that just because they're acquitted doesn't mean that they're going to be able to keep their certificate. Like
Hmm.
we have seen cases where maybe they settled out of court or they did a plea agreement or something, but when it got brought before us, we still review all the evidence that was collected, and we look at all the things that are set before us, and we sometimes disagree with what the way that the courts decided, and and that person may not go to jail, but they may not be able to keep their certificate because of um, and I'd say that often it's because of the way that that person conducted themselves during investigation. I'd say that's almost always one of the things that um, catches people up.
Yeah, thank you. One of the other questions, and again, I really appreciate everyone asking questions and Rebecca for being willing to answer. This is, and Mike spoke to your courage and willingness to serve. And I think everyone here wants to improve safety in Alaska,
Yeah,
so. Just
And
as I
I
keep these hard questions rolling, I wanted to
I know.
remember why we're doing this. So
And you know, a
yeah.
lot of times we, like, as a council members, we don't agree with how things are happening. And we in several council meetings in the past, we've had council members say, why is this case not before us? Why did we hear about this? Like, can you look into this? And so it's not they're yeah, it's a thing that's in motion, I should say. And also I just want to put a plug out there that there are open seats on that council right now. And I my ultimate goal is that there would be more women on the council. There's a few, but I'd like there to be more women. And I think there needs to be Alaska Native representation. And there hasn't been. And I've brought this up multiple times. So this, with a new election, the next governor, it's possible that there will, if there's, to keep an eye out for those seats um, being open for those public members, because I just think if we could get more representation on the board, it can change the way that the board makes decisions. And like I said at the beginning, like, I'm not speaking as like uh, I can't speak as a spokesperson for the council because I'm only one person. And when we sit down in executive session and we vote, we often disagree, and we don't always come to a consensus about things at all. There's often times when the group is split about how something is handled, and that's the nature of boards. Unfortunately, sometimes you're sitting on a board and you feel like the board made the wrong decision. And but as a body of 15 people, you have to accept that that's sometimes the way it goes. But I feel like continuing to fill a role and also to bring different um, representation into the group can really kind of sway the way decisions begin to be made and the way that things are um, the way that things are viewed by the council. So I would encourage people to get involved if you possibly can. I know that there's, I believe, 3 open seats, and or at least 2 public open seats right now. And I was hoping that through this process, I've gotten the word out to a lot of people in the advocacy world, and to you folks. And I'm just hoping that there will be some people that will put their name in the hat, um, and maybe we could begin to change things.
Yeah.
One other thing I really
For
want to put out there
reflecting that.
is that every time we have a meeting, there's the public can be in the meeting, they can listen, and there's a spot for public, um, what do you, for you to have 3 minutes to say your piece about any subject. And so please feel free to attend and to bring some of these subjects to the council. I can tell you that we can't answer or go into question and answer during that section of the meeting. But I will say that what we have heard in those meetings from the public often comes into our discussions in our um, deliberative sessions when we are alone in the room. Um, those things, you might not get an answer in the moment, but those things do add to the discussion, and they come up in our discussions. And so it is having an effect, even if you don't actually see it or see receipts of it right away.
Great. Are we able to see those scheduled meetings on the website?
Yes,
Okay.
they'll be on that, and it's under the DPD um, uh, website. We have a whole
Okay.
section there. And if you're
Okay.
if you're looking for where to find out if there's board seats available, you can go to on that website. It'll say boards. It's all of the governor appointee boards, and it'll say boards and commissions, and then you could go on there, and that's where you can find out what boards are out there and how to apply. And
Okay.
the other thing to know is that when you do apply, it you have to be you you have to be accepted by the legislature. So when you apply and the governor puts your name out there, then there's different committees that will call you up to testify about, to about yourself, um, about your background, and about what you do. And we have had at different times where the governor appointed someone and then they didn't make it through that process, which you know um, that can sound intimidating, but it's part of being part of getting the word out there and being part of the way our government works.
Yeah, actually, speaking of the legislature, one of the questions and one of the engaged citizens was commenting and questioning. There's a group of community members that have been trying to get reasonable care standards added to the Alaska state law for use of force by officers. Adding these reasonable care standards would hold officers to a higher standard of accountability for excessive use of force. Can APSC recommend that the legislature adopt a higher standard for officer use of force?
Um, so I think it is possible, but it often doesn't happen because the people that are down in Juneau that are being called in to, testify, um, are they can't speak for the whole council at once. So they can't um, they can't advocate or not advocate for something without consulting with the whole council and getting the council to agree. So there, like I said, there's no one person that can be a spokesman for the whole council. So, but there have been times when we voted to be in support of something, and then our executive director would speak on that. So it is something where we can have an effect, but it isn't something like where we have jurisdiction, I'd say, like where we can go and make it happen. Um, but we can advocate for it if the council agrees.
Thank you. And then there's, you mentioned some regulations, and I believe Antonia wanted to clarify and make sure, are these the ones that are listed in 13 AAC 85?
Yes.
Just to make sure we're talking about the same things. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they
Thanks
are
for that
listed
confirm.
right on the website, I believe, where, and you can see on the website who holds all the different seats on the council. And in that same area, you can also see what our regulations are.
All right. Thank you for answering all these tough questions. There's some comments as well in the chat, just seeing cases that have been frustrating where we believe that police officer should have been decertified and wasn't. I think we all feel that. We answered the question about when the next meeting is. Um, and I know that again, we're over lunchtime, and so we have been recording. And Rebecca, I think for some reason your screen went purple, so I
Yeah.
just want you to know you're like a beautiful shade of lavender.
Yeah, that happens to my screen sometimes, and I've never been able to figure out what goes wrong, and I can't make it change. So I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm
Um,
in
and then
lavender.
in And then, Antonia, if folks are still on, we dropped also our survey for these webinars in the chat, and we really appreciate the feedback from people who attended. So if you get a moment to please fill out the survey, we appreciate it. Um, but yeah, Rebecca, did we cover everything you wanted to share in this
Um,
time, or was
I
there anything else?
I feel like, yeah, I feel like there could be so much more discussion about it. And I feel like I don't want people to feel like, oh, this is the answer to all of our like we're gonna make a complaint to these people and they'll fix it, because as we know, it's a big complex problem that no one organization can just change it on a dime. So I really appreciate your continued advocacy for what we know to be true and right and fair. And hopefully you don't get too fatigued in this fight. But we just all have to kind of keep trying to do our little parts. And the one thing I do know that I can always offer to you is that you can be heard at our meetings. And I I know that that seems like a small thing, but it really, um, it makes a big difference in the long run. The more people hear about something, the more it's brought up, um, the more it becomes central to the conversations behind closed doors. So I encourage you to attend.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very generous offering. And again, yeah, we believe in working together. We do these webinar series so that we can better understand processes and governance and decision making, and figure out things like those community spots. That our team at DIJ and I know our partners in the working group are all committed to doing this together, and building relationships. And so your offering is graciously received, and I think you'll probably get to know some of us pretty well.
Yeah. No, and I'm happy to
Yeah.
talk. I'm happy to talk one-on-one with any of you if you have questions. Of course, I don't have all the answers to everything, but I certainly can help by asking questions, and and just the more I know about what other people's concerns are around the state, the better I can advocate for what is better for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone in the chat. There's some appreciation comments. Thank you for all your hard work. And we can stop the recording, the lavender recording.